I can get this very fast. So I got an email about 2:15, 2 o'clock yesterday that said that the English exam was taking some people a long time. So what they decided to do was take away one day of the social studies benchmark. So it's been postponed until tomorrow.
I literally finished that in 15 minutes. What are these people doing?
They're not smart. So
But did you do good?
that
The
is.
only problem I have is bumbling the right one.
Yeah, that was.
So, this is kind of, at least for our purposes, I'm gonna consider this kind of a blessing in disguise, because I can go over the Enlightenment, the Scientific Revolution, questions that are gonna be on your exam, okay? So this is kind of a good thing, trade-off wise. I know that, notes for some people, they don't like it, but there's this is the cultural stuff, so this is usually for some people that interesting. Yes. Is that student notes?
Yeah, I already had
Wait till we're almost. All right. That looks like.
They were supposed to come.
It's a light blue, but it's like muted.
Those papers are supposed to come. What did my dad say?
What college time?
I can't believe we got 3 more years until college.
All right.
That's scary.
So second period. I don't really know what's up with them lately. They have been exceptionally talkative during lecture time, or even when I'm giving instructions. So, what I've advertised. If I can't get them to be quiet during the lectures, I'm not gonna really punish them. But I'm gonna do what I do with 6th period. And I no longer lecture 6th period. So what I do is I give them some notes and I give them this slideshow and I say, okay, do it. And that's their work. Because I can't lecture them. I can do that with 2nd period. I don't mind doing it for every class, but I think that as honors classes, I should be able to lecture and you should be able to kind of keep up with some of the things that I'm saying and do it in a way where you're relatively quiet. Last year, I tried something a little bit different because I thought that it was very important that I lecture. I still think it's important. And what I did is I just took the kids that wanted to be here, that wanted to listen, and I sat them right here. And the kids that didn't want to do anything, I made them sit over in the corner and do whatever they wanted to. And they failed. Which is fine with me, I don't really care.
All of them failed?
Pretty much all of them, yeah. It only took one exam, and they all bombed it. But the lecturing portion of of social studies, unfortunately, is very important. And we're gonna continue to move that way as more and more research comes out that's actually confirming that lecturing is a way that a lot of us retain information better than student-led, what are called inquiry activities, okay? So I can get through this very quickly. There's some interesting processes that we need to be aware of that I need to spell out and that are not spelled out in the lecture slides, okay? So as I go through this, I'll talk a little bit about each thing. I need to talk about the Enlightenment, the Scientific Revolution, the Reformation, get those out of the way. This is your last slideshow for your Unit 5. So after next week, we'll be getting ready for a Unit 5 exam. It comes quickly. And then we finally get into the interesting stuff like building up to World War I. And then we get to World War II. And then we get to the modern day, Cold War, fun stuff like that. So we are almost done with the ancient, boring stuff to most students. So we're getting
Wait, so next.
Yeah, briefly I talk about proxy wars during Cold War. But it's enveloped in the entirety of the Cold War. So it's small. And I love talking about Vietnam. I'm big on that. Korea.
It might be my birthday.
Wait, next week is our birthday.
Next week.
Don't worry about it.
Next week?
It's not next
What I'm
week.
going to talk about
The
is the spread of Christianity During this time period, the power kind of shifts away from Islam and towards Christianity. Remember, Christianity, when they were surrounded by Islam, who did they look to for power and security? The church, and they formed these kingdoms, and those kingdoms were the bastions against Islam. They were the defending areas against Islam. Now that they've been able to kind of defend themselves and shore up their borders, they're going to start to spread. Okay? They think that it's important that they spread Christianity because that's part of what's in the Bible is not only do you believe what you believe, but you need to try to help other people find the light. So, the globalization of Christianity and also forcibly through colonization. Let's not forget that. Persistence and change in Afro-Asian traditions, so we'll see how China kind of stays the same culturally. Africa changes a little bit culturally, things like that. And then our modern science birth, which has a lot to do with the scientific revolution and the Enlightenment. Okay, so a lot of this stuff is much more interesting than, okay, what empire was here? What empire was here? This one talks about why some of that stuff was spread and what spread itself. Okay?
Yeah.
So the big first thing, remember when Europe went inward and went to the church for authority, what specific church are we talking about?
Catholic.
The Catholic Church. Okay? The Catholic Church becomes very powerful and very rich. During this time, and I've talked about it before, but it was very briefly, the Catholic Church introduces the indulgence system, which is paying for forgiveness. So in a regular Catholic Church service, at some point during the time they take up the offering, and that's when believers, people who have seen their lives changed by Christianity, are supposed to give what's called their tithe. And tithe just means 10%. So 10% of what they make a month or a year or whatever, that is what God asks them to give to the church, so that the church can do their mission stuff and help build the church and stuff like that. So the idea here is on top of that tithe, that 10%, there are these indulgences. So if you have a family member that maybe didn't live a great life, wasn't a very nice person, you could go to a Catholic priest of your church and say, hey, if I give 20%, can you ensure that my relative who wasn't a good person, can you ensure that they are forgiven of their sins? I don't know if they asked for forgiveness, if they came to confession. And the priest would say, yeah, sure, yeah. We'll take that extra 10%. And we'll ensure that not only your relative is forgiven of their sins, you'll be forgiven for your sins that you've committed up to this point. Okay? Nowhere, absolutely nowhere in the Bible is there anything that mentions anything outside of a tithe, like an indulgence. You cannot buy your way to heaven. In fact, the Bible specifically states that it is harder for rich people to enter heaven than it is the poorest men. So, essentially saying you can't buy your way to heaven. But the Catholic Church is saying, well, we can buy you to heaven. You go to us. So Martin Luther is a priest that's been studying in the Catholic Church for a long time. He sees this indulgence system and he sees how much money the Catholic Church is making. And the guys who are high up in the Catholic Church, they're not necessarily putting that money back into the church. They're buying land, they're buying estates, they're buying power, political power, like buying people off and stuff. So Martin Luther is looking through the Bible and looking for justification for this indulgence system, and he can't find it. So he has some doubt. So what he does is he creates this document, you probably heard of it before, the 95 Theses, and he spells out 95 things that he thinks are wrong with the Catholic Church, the things that they're doing wrong to the people, okay, that don't have any basis in the Bible. He debates these issues. He plants the document, nails it to the church door, but then he debates these with other Catholics. And obviously within those debates, he exposes them for what they're doing. They're misusing the money. And they're getting too worried about political power rather than leading people where they need to be. Okay? So Martin Luther starts the Reformation. Okay? His original goal, it's important to note this, his original goal was not to separate from the church. It was to fix it. He was trying to help. So he wanted to repair the Catholic Church, not split it up. An effect of this, however, was that there is distrust of the Catholic Church. The people that have been exposed to this information are pissed, and justifiably so. The money that they were giving to the church, the extra money, this is not money that they were using to go to Disney World. This is money that they needed to put food on the table. Okay? So instead of, oh, you took away our vacation, or oh, you took away this extra meal, or this extra whatever we could have had, this luxury item, it was, you took money from us that caused my family to not be able to eat for a week. So these people are justifiably pissed at the Catholic Church. And a lot of those people decide, we don't even want to be associated with the Catholic Church anymore. We're done with them. So they split off into this group called the Protestants. The Protestants.
Is that the Protestant Reformation?
Yes, the Protestants. The word, what word in there is important to note for the people that decided to go against the Catholic Church. The word protest. That's why they're called the Protestants, because they protest against Catholic power. So, a lot of people don't trust the Catholic Church anymore. They can't go back. They don't feel like they would be able to live their best Christian life. So, they split off and they form these churches. At first, they're Protestant churches. And as we start to see the Bible spread through the printing press, Martin Luther encourages people to educate themselves. Read the Bible, he says. Educate yourself. Interpret the Bible how you interpret it. It's important for you to interpret the Bible for yourself as well. Okay? This has a huge effect. Remember, the Catholic Church, how did they distribute the truth from the Bible? They just said it, and the people believed it inherently. It was, whatever you say is true, we believe you, because you haven't strewn us in the wrong way yet. Now that we have distrust in the Catholic Church, people are like, okay, maybe we should read the Bible ourselves and then let us decide if you're right or not. So this causes some real issues for the Catholic Church. So what ends up happening is these Protestant churches split, and they sort of disagree on some of their interpretations. So that's why the Protestant church just splinters, and it turns into the Methodists and the Baptists and the Episcopals and the whatever else. There, however many different kinds of Protestant churches. Okay, they all split. They still believe the same thing pretty much. They just disagree on a couple of interpretations of the Bible in specific areas. So, not a huge deal. Now, one thing we do talk about in AP that's important to note, and you may see this, I doubt it, but women's roles here don't change a lot, but they change a little bit. Okay, so where are women? What's their social role still? In the home. They're in the home. They're taking care of the house. They're taking care of the kids. Okay, they're raising kids. Well, Martin Luther encourages reading the Bible, educating yourself. So what happens is these families would go out and spend a good bit of money on a family Bible. They bring that Bible home, and while the men are out working, the women are educating themselves through the Bible, so that they can educate their children. So women see a jump or a boost in their education during this time. However, their roles in the church do not change. In fact, the Protestant church does away with what's called female veneration, which is saints like Mary. People in the Catholic Church, veneration is sort of like worship. They worship the saints, right? Like St. Mark and St. Matthew and St. Mary and all these other ones. The female ones and the male ones, they do away with that. They say the only person you need to be focused on is God in the Protestant religion. So women sort of lose some status within the religion because of that, but they do see a rise in their education, which is important. So this point here, super important, okay? And it's the way that they do it that's important. The way that the Catholic Church reforms is really important. So if the Catholic Church were to go to the people and say, yeah, you were right, we were wrong, we'll change up, we'll change some of our policies, and we'll just, we'll create new stuff. The people might react in a negative way, right? That would create more distrust. So what the Catholic people do is they pull a perfect political move and they say, okay, here's what we're going to do. We need to go back and let's look at our policies. Let's look at some of the things that we tell people to do. They go behind closed doors. They fix some of the things that the people don't like that were in the 95 Theses. And then they come out and they say, okay, here's what we did. So we come back to our policies and we realized that it may have been hard for you, the people, to understand what we were trying to say. So you might have been misinterpreting it. So what we did is we went back in and we made it easier for you to understand. Okay? So that's the way that they frame it. So they still save face. It's a lot of things that like politicians do. Like when politicians say something racist or sexist or whatever, when they get cornered in the media or when they have an interview when somebody asks them about it, they say, well, that's not exactly what I mean. I think you misinterpreted what I was saying. And they go back and kind of try to save face. The same thing happens here. They don't say, okay, we got to fix this stuff. They say, we're gonna revise some of this stuff and make it easier for you to understand because you're the ones who are misinterpreting it. So they save some face and reform and try to align themselves more with what the Bible says. So it has some positive impacts for both the Catholic Church and the Protestant Church. And then lastly, the Bible being printed in many languages allows it to be distributed to a broader audience. And people, especially women, can educate themselves in the Bible. Blah. Okay, Christianity, here's where it spreads. Christianity starts to see a rise in a bunch of different areas. Number one is Russia. I don't think we necessarily equate Christianity with Russia now. But they are the Eastern Orthodox form of Christianity. So do we remember what empire started that Eastern Orthodox Christianity? Byzantine Empire, good. So the Byzantine Empire, their Christianity, their form of Christianity spreads to Russia. Russia brings that back. Okay. The British and the Dutch bring theirs to North America, bring Christianity to North America, and they have a variety of stuff because they have the Catholics and the Protestants and blah, blah, blah. Okay. The Spanish, and this is something that still exists today in Mexico and South America, they are really, really strict Catholics. Roman Catholic, that's what 99% of the Spanish are. They are Catholic all the way through. Okay. In Africa, how might Africa be exposed to Christianity? Yes.
Colonization.
Colonization and the slave trade. Yeah. So within the slave trade, these African prisoners of war, debtors, criminals that these African kings are selling to the Europeans, as they bring them over across the Middle Passage and then force them to work, they're exposed to the Europeans' Christianity. Now, what some Africans do is they accept Christianity as it is. They say, okay, this makes sense to me. And that sort of tradition carries on in America. There's a large percentage of the African American population in America are still Christian, Protestant Christian. Okay, it's a large number. Now those numbers are shrinking as we move more and more towards like a secular worldview. But and that's all the way around for every race and ethnicity or whatever. Some African slaves bring over their religion that they had in Africa, and they kind of mix in some of Christianity with it. It's called a syncretic religion. It's just a mix of some of them. So we have religions that come out of what's called Africanized Christianity. Some of the religions that pop up out of there would be voodoo and Santeria, and kind of funky mystic religions like that. They incorporate some parts of Christianity, but not all. Now it fails to spread in China, North Africa, and the Middle East. Why might that be? Yeah, they already have a religion. In North Africa and the Middle East, they have what?
Islam.
Islam, yeah. So they have Islam, and in China, do we remember what they have? Buddhism, right? So, Ethiopia is this area in Africa. You know on the map where Ethiopia is. Ethiopia is exposed to Christianity, but that's about it in Africa. In China, China already has a religion. They aren't really worried about a religion. But what a lot of the Christians realize is that in order to spread Christianity, they have to do it in kind of a secretive way. So as opposed to colonization, when they can force their religion on slaves and natives or whatever, who controls society within China? You remember? Just underneath the emperor, is it? They're sort of nobles. What's important about this group? They are very what? Amen. Educated. So they're super, super smart. So what they do is China creates this system that's called a meritocracy, and basically all of that means is that China sets up their society based on your knowledge. What a novel concept. If you're smart, you should be able to do more. You should be able to have the higher end jobs. Wow, that's interesting. We don't do that here. But the idea is that the people who are smarter should be doing the more important stuff because they're smarter, right? They'll pay more attention to stuff. So the Christians say, okay, here's the way that we can make our way into China is we kind of disguise ourselves, okay? In Africa, again, the slave trade causes some interaction with Christianity. It mixes around. Basically same thing we just said. In the Middle East, this is an AP sort of thing, but we have what's called the Wahhabi take over in the Islamic nations. And what they do is they say, okay, Christianity is starting to spread. And in the same way we were spreading in the last time period and the Christians got scared and they confined themselves and built up their borders, we need to do the same thing. Okay, now we're being surrounded. So what they do is they have what's called a revival, but they go back to a very strict form of Islam. They think that people are not following the religion as strictly as they should be. So they do things like they ban instruments. They ban mind-altering substances like tobacco and hashish and like caffeine, like tea. It's like marijuana, pretty much. So they ban all of these things. They ban music. Can't play music. And they want to do that so that they keep people focused on Islam because they're scared of the Christianity spreading. So they eventually fall to the Ottoman Empire, and the Ottoman Empire lasts up until World War I. So it's a long time. They're the longest lasting Islamic empire. So with, I think China's the next slide here. Yeah. So with China, if China runs what's called a meritocracy, where you're given jobs and power based on your merit, your intellect, how might Christians be able to infiltrate Chinese society to better spread Christianity?
Is there a way they can influence their education?
Sort of. You're on the right track. So what might they disguise themselves as? Yeah, smart people, smart Chinese people. So they disguise themselves as Chinese scholars, and they describe themselves as traveling Chinese scholars. And what they do is they go into Chinese universities and schools and stuff and talk to the really smart people that have all the power. Yeah.
So you said disguise stuff. So are they Chinese and they're just Christian, or are they just?
These are either European or Russian or whatever Christians. And they're making their way. So they say, "Oh, I'm a traveling scholar. I've been all over the world," which they have. But that's who comes over. Yes.
Did they ever recognize them?
Yes, to an extent, but they didn't really, because China runs this meritocracy. It wasn't as important where they were from because they were smart. So with China, they were accepting of you. If you were a smart person, they would allow you to interact with their people. You're an idiot, they say, you can't come into China, we don't want you. Go away. So kind of like my classroom. So I just have like illegal immigrants coming in here, illegal stupid people coming immigrate through my border. I need to put up a wall. That's what I'll do. Put up a wall. So make the stupid people pay for it. Yeah, that's right. So in China, what they do is they disguise themselves as scholars and they go and have scholarly debates with these people and they say, no. Now some of this still exists because in
They would not.
in areas like China and India too, India's really bad about this. Christianity is like persecuted. And Jewish people, like in China right now, they're putting Muslim people in like concentration camps. They're rounding them up and putting them in camps and torturing them. Yeah,
Where?
in China.
What?
They won't really listen to us. We're not like super big friends with them. So these missionaries they go into China and they talk it up with the scholars and they try to introduce Christianity. That doesn't really work, but it does show to the Chinese that the Europeans are kind of smart, that they have some smart people. They're not all dumb. Now, China continues, I think, Justin, you bring up a good point. Some of that stuff does continue. This is called a Neo-Confucianist era in China. And the big thing that still continues, Confucius, when we talked about him like 3 units ago, he advertised these things called civil service exams. And basically what would happen, and it still happens today, is at a certain age, now it's like 13, you go and you take an exam. And that exam determines what you do for the rest of your life, where you go to school, what sort of people you are around, what sort of job you'll have, what sort of place you'll live in, what location you're going to live. All of that is decided for you at the age of 13. Crazy. So China has this huge issue, like more so than America. China has this gigantic issue with mental illness because kids obviously shouldn't, it doesn't necessarily bode well for them to decide who they're going to be when they're 13 years old because nobody knows. We still have kids in 9th grade that are like, I want to be a YouTube star. You got to get a job at some point. So it's dangerous. Now, granted, it's really good because it takes all the smart kids and it puts them in a smart kid school and they really compete with each other. And that's why China has they produce some of the most intelligent people in the world because they're very competitive. So this sort of cultural thing still exists today. And that's why in China and in Japan as well. But in China, they have really high suicide rates because the kids that do bad on the exam, they think that they're not worth anything because they push those kids towards farming, factory work, so they kill themselves.
Do you guys do that?
It's awful.
They still do those things today?
Yeah, China has a huge mental illness problem. Really, really bad anxiety.
Oh my.
I don't really know how they do it. Everything. Yep. It's like an aptitude or an IQ test. They just. Yeah. It's like if in 8th grade, when you finished 8th grade, you had to take this exam that covered 6th through 8th grade, and then based on that exam, you either went to a private school where they had really high test scores, or you go to like West Bay. There's like no in between, right? So a lot of kids are like, anxiety is really bad in China. Kids are having panic attacks all the time. It's really, really bad. But I'm pretty sure it's at like 13, like right around 8th grade. And those kids will their parents understand how important it is as well. So they'll take like time off of school and they'll study for weeks to get ready for this exam. It's so much more important.
What is it even on? Like what?
It's like an aptitude or like an IQ test.
So it's like an overall. Like,
Yeah. I was saying to them, like, if you went into 8th grade and right when you graduated from 8th grade to come up here, you took an exam. And the exam was on everything from K to 8th grade.
Okay.
And it's difficult, obviously, but it tests your IQ in all the 4 big subjects, but also in things like art, writing.
Wait, art.
Stuff
How
like
is
that.
it great art?
So art and like art interpretation. Who were these famous works by? Stuff like that, like really crazy stuff. And based on what you score on the exam, it's like you go to like a private school, like a Ravenscroft in like Raleigh or whatever, or you go to like Westminster. And there's not a lot in between. And wherever you would go, you get ready for factory work or farming. And if you're up here, you get ready for teaching, lawyer, medical stuff.
Don't they
Those-
try in most Asian countries, like?
Yeah, the three biggest jobs you can have in the Asian market is doctor, lawyer, teacher, in that order. Those are the three biggest jobs. Doctors are really important, lawyers are pretty important, and teachers are way more important than a lot of other societies. Yeah. So for instance, if I went over there, or I went to like, if I went to Saudi Arabia.
Mechanics and janitors and all that, is that?
Yeah.
Is that like in the middle?
Yeah, that middle to lower end. Yeah. So like if I went to teach in Saudi Arabia, I would make, I think it was almost $200,000 a year.
Go!
Yeah, why
don't you go?
And in China, I would make about the same. So they pay their teachers really well.
About $200,000.
Yeah, you make an insane amount of money.
Why don't you just learn Chinese and then go?
See how interesting that is? We're like,
How young?
you're just a teacher. Like how do you make that much money? But over there, they're like, oh my gosh, you're a teacher. You must be really smart. It's like two totally different ideas about teachers, right? Because in China, they put their best and their brightest as teachers and doctors and lawyers. And in America, it's either if teaching is a calling, which I believe that it was a calling for me, but you also don't get the cream of the crop. It's
There's
people
something
that,
wrong with
you know,
it.
didn't want to do it. Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah. Let's not hide that. I'm a big bully. That's how I.
If you choose teaching as a career, you're mentally unstable.
So big thing about Christianity. So they disguise themselves as scholars. The Chinese are like, cool, you're really smart and you believe Christianity. That's all right, cool, good for you. So they don't really convert. Now the emperor is not going to switch. He refuses to switch. Why would he refuse to switch?
Because he's the emperor of power.
Where all his power is where? Through what?
Oh, it's in the
Mandate of heaven.
Mandate of heaven. Yeah, the mandate of heaven. If he switches to Christianity, the mandate of heaven is non-existent, doesn't exist anymore. So he loses his power.
Did he not say God from him power?
He could, but again, remember, in China, they're all about a meritocracy. So the people who are the ones in power, they would be doing a lot of research.
So he couldn't be like, God said I'm smart.
Yeah, it's the same thing that like the Christians are doing right now. Because as soon as the Catholic Church starts coming into question, the people are like, God didn't tell you you could rule. We have a social contract. John Locke comes up with a social contract and says, if you're not doing things in their best interest, you have the right for them to overthrow you and kill you. So yeah.
When Christians went over to China, did they like question them because like they didn't look at them?
Yeah, I mean, they understood that. Again, because China cares so much more about intelligence than like we do, because they were intelligent, they were accepted. It was like, it's like, you know, like a college atmosphere where like, if you're smart, you really want to expose yourself to those people because they impress on you.
Were they just like not like pretending to be smart, or were they like?
No, they were actually studying. Yeah, intelligence was way more important back during this time. India, you have Muslim versus Hindu conflicts. The Mughal Empire takes over in India. They're Islamic, so there's some issues there, and we create that religion called Sikhism, which is just a blend of the two.
What are you doing?
Okay, scientific revolution.
Stop that.
Scientific revolution is really important. It seems really like it's very basic for one particular reason. So the scientific revolution, if we boil it down, they figure out the scientific method and they use it. So the scientific method for you guys is like common sense, like duh. You know, you've got your question, hypothesis, whatever, experiment, evidence, whatever, conclusion, or however the scientific method goes. But the idea here for the scientific revolution is these guys finally say, hey, whatever's going on in the natural world, it might not always be like God's wrath. if you want to talk about something happening, or if you believe something's happening in the world, in the natural world, scientifically, whatever, you need to have evidence. You need to bring evidence. So that's the big thing. Is for these guys that have these opinions, they need to be able to back it up with evidence. Okay? So using the scientific area everywhere they possibly can, they're learning a lot more about the world around them. And again, in second period, everybody's like, well, that's just common sense. Like, duh. So common sense started during this time period? Sorta. Kinda, I guess. If you wanted to look at it that way. This is only like 400 years ago, too. When we decided that evidence is important when you have an opinion. So, again, when we get into the cultural stuff with technology, in 400 years, we've gone from common sense, using evidence to look at scientific equations. So 400 years later, boom, we have iPhones. So very quick boom in technology. We're building off each other quickly. So the people, again, they still question the church because those natural things they're starting to figure out are not necessarily the wrath of God. It's just clouds that create like thunder and lightning, some sort of environmental condition or whatever, stuff like that. So these are some of the important ones that you may need to know. These are some of the important scientists that you may want to know. You may want to know these, right? So you might want to maybe.
Is it Copernicus?
Yeah.
Can you go back for like 2 seconds? Like maybe 1, 2 seconds.
1, 2. Cool. Very nice assessment of time. So these scientists are really important. Some of them you've probably heard of. Hopefully you've heard of Newton and gravity. Claire,
Heard of
Newton and gravity. Yeah. She's not paying attention.
I don't think she likes you.
No, she doesn't, because I always talk about it. The sun being the center of the universe, we figured that out. Again, somebody mentioned, well, our sun isn't the center of the universe. Well, they didn't understand that yet, but we did prove during this time that the sun was the center of at least our galaxy. They didn't know like what a galaxy was or whatever, because they had just invented the telescope. So Galileo, what's going on too? And these fibers run here and blah, blah, blah. So Kepler has the elliptical orbits. Descartes does logic. You can take logic class in college. I don't recommend it because they're very difficult. But this math logic is taking the idea of logic and the ideas of logic and turning it into a math problem. It still makes no sense to me. I tried it. I couldn't do it. It was so difficult. But it takes some of those ideas of logic and puts it in mathematical. Okay? And then we got Newton, gravity, the laws of motion.
I'm not done yet.
So is that when math was invented?
Some parts of math.
Like-
I
Like
can't
the
remember
X
when.
and Y.
I hate fine.
More. I wouldn't say we're there yet. I think this is more like area of a circle type stuff.
Circumference?
Yeah, circumference and perimeter or what is that same thing? No, circumference is different. Golly, I'm forgetting that. That was
See, we
a-
don't need this.
That was
We
a
don't
dumb
need
thing
it,
for,
so-
yeah, you're gonna be a history teacher. I still sort of use math, but I got a calculator back there. I
Calculator.
got a
So we
calculator.
decided right now we want to be a history teacher, will we even have to do math?
Yes.
Yes, to graduate.
Oh.
Graduating high school used to mean that you are ready to be, if you have to go out and get a job, if you can't get to college. High school used to be, okay, you have your high school degree, you can go out and you can work. You know how to at least work.
We don't know
So-
how to do that.
Now, obviously, that's not as important. You have to have like a college degree.
Or you can get your, what's it
It's
called?
crazy. Your associates.
No.
Associate's degrees are losing power as well. You get certification. Huh? Oh, yeah. You have to go to college, you have to go to grad school.
Stuff like that.
What other
Classes where you like cook and like stuff like that.
They don't have those anymore. I don't want that.
Yeah, they got rid of that when I was in middle school. So I was one of the last people to take a home ec class.
Why? I feel like that's
That would be so much
fun.
Yeah, it's a money thing.
I don't know how to wash clothes, like I don't know how to. I know to
Your
wash.
parents should teach
You better
you
get
that.
used to that. So you're gonna have a rich husband and wash your clothes and does the
Yeah,
dishes
you
too.
know
What are you gonna do?
Yeah, he's just.
Good.
Your parents like.
All right, lastly, the Enlightenment. This is very important. Okay, these ideas shape society up until right now. This very second. So they use this scientific method, but they apply it to society and culture. So we'll talk about some of the Enlightenment ideas next year, where the guys are like, oh, if you leave people alone, there's a guy called Hobbes,
Oh.
Thomas Hobbes.
Oh yeah.
And Thomas Hobbes has this idea where he says, if you leave people alone and you let them kind of do whatever in nature, they will naturally drift to anarchy. So they need control. And then you have another guy that comes in, I think it was Rousseau, and he says, if you leave people alone, they're inherently going to do the correct things. They're going to develop democracy and do what's best for their families and the people around them. So this scientific type approach to government, economics, and sociology creates a lot of the things that we have today. So John Locke starts the social contract where he says, look, if you're a ruler and you're doing a crap job, your people not only should, they have the right to overthrow you, to overthrow your power. How do you think John Locke? They deserve the ability to go out of the house. This was very revolutionary, and it got him in trouble with a lot of the governments because society, they felt like if they were allowed to enter society and become part of the public life, they would like muddle it down. I don't really know how they had that idea, but whatever. And then Adam Smith came up with an economic law. Does anybody know Adam Smith's economic philosophy, what he created?
Oh, wait, who?
Capitalism.
Oh,
The government,
So like Raleigh?
our economic system, he created it. Okay, so his idea was competition drives innovation. If you have competition amongst a bunch of companies, it'll drive prices down for the people, and it'll create innovation in the products. He also talked about this thing called the invisible hand. And the invisible hand was, like the stock market goes like up and down, up and down, up and down a lot. We have like highs, we have lows. His theory was called the invisible hand, where you have, as the market starts to dip, as the market starts to do bad and people are losing money and blah, 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 as a publicly traded company. So you can go to eTrade.com or whatever, and you can load up money into your E-Trade account and say, I'm confident that if you want to make money, I'm confident that Krispy Kreme is going to make a new product that's going to make them a lot more money than they have right now. So you buy what are called stocks. And basically all they are pieces of the company, very like real small pieces of the company, but you have like a 0.00001% control over the company. Okay? So in a stock market, what you do is you bet on companies like Bitcoin. With Bitcoin, that's the best thing I can think of right now. People invested a lot of money in Bitcoin like a few years ago. Oh, Bitcoin's going to be big, and nothing happened for a long time. And so these people were kind of losing money and making a little bit of money. Shit, those things were sharing at about, those things were sharing at like $2 a share, $2 a stock. And then all of a sudden, bam, the Bitcoin craze hit, and those $2 stocks were selling for $3,000 a piece. So the guy who came into Bitcoin and said, there was a story on like a 10-year-old who took his allowance, and his dad was like, okay, what do you want to put money in? He just said, let's just do this Bitcoin thing. It's like 10 years old. Did it like 4 or 5 years ago, and they just said, we'll leave your allowance in that stock. And when the Bitcoin craze hit, he became a millionaire. Like that at the age of like 12. So my advice is with the stock market, the people who are very rich, not necessarily, so the people who are very rich, you have to understand, the people who are like mega rich that are not ever going to run out of money if they live for 3,000 years, they make their money in the stock market. You can predict money, where the money's going to go. You can be smart about what you bet.
Oh, so if you have like your own company, you can invest in some things in the stock market?
Yeah. If you're over the age of 18, you can invest in any company that's on the stock market. So like Amazon, Apple, whatever. Now their stocks are, if you want to buy one stock of Apple, it's like $800 or whatever. Or you could go to a company that's small and you think, oh, they're creating a technology that might be big in like 10 years. and their stocks are selling for 50 cents, and you buy 5,000 stocks or whatever, and you pay $2,500 for a huge stake in that company.
Myers should
And
make
if
a
they-
class on this.
If they create like a new medical product that everybody starts using, you're gonna be a billionaire. Like, you're never gonna have to worry about money ever again. So what you do is once that stock goes up, it's like betting, like when you're playing blackjack or playing poker or whatever. The biggest thing about betting money, you gotta know when to pull out. You gotta know when to sell your stock. You gotta know when to get rid of it. Because eventually, according to Adam Smith, eventually the invisible hand comes in and they lose money. So you gotta like the Bitcoin stuff, people were watching the stock rise and rise and rise and rise and rise and rise. And eventually over winter of 2017, winter of 2017, the stock started to fall, and now they're falling back down, and people are losing a little bit of money.
It's in a game where you get tired.
It is. It's just like it's gambling, but you're gambling. You can gamble. It's not all luck. Some of it is luck. A lot of it is luck. But you have to do your research and say, okay, this company is getting ready to do this. There are some guys that make a ton of money, and the guys who make like buku money, they do what's called day trading. So they wake up at like 5 a.m. and they have their research from the day before of what companies are going to have their annual meetings, what companies are going to put out a new product today in China or whatever. And they invest money in them, and bam, they sell that product, and they watch it rise a little bit, and then they sell it real fast. And they do that to like 50 different stocks all day long. That's what they do. And that's how they make their living. In order to make money doing that, you got to be really smart. Because the stock market, it doesn't make a lot of sense how it works with the numbers. And all. I don't really get it, honestly, all the way. But if you want to get rich real fast, stock market. Stock market's the way to go. And when you invest in companies, you invest in the American economy. So companies, if you invest some money, and a lot of people invest some money in a company, they get that money and they might use it to create something that cures cancer or whatever. So you might be a part of it. So it's sort of that. Yes.
Don't we have business class in the school? Does it kind of stop?
I think it's an online class.
Coach Wynn teaches that.
Coach Wynn teaches it. Is it business entrepreneurship? Entrepreneurship is really good because you can kind of learn. Hopefully, he teaches how to do like small business. You can own your own business.
I just want to be.
If you're in a local market like me, and a lot of people know me in Denver because that's where I grew up. And if I were to create some business in Denver, and I could make money doing it because I already have what's called brand recognition. People know me. I could, take whatever I know about entrepreneurship and advertise myself and maybe make some money, sort of like that. Because some people that own their own, that's a good way to retire. If you own your own business and you just hire people to run it, you don't even have to show up like once a week. You say, hey, I hope things are good.
That's not really retiring though.
Not really, but not having to show up to an office is a really good thing.
And you don't have to worry about driving because we have other people.
Yeah.
To take care
And
of.
just for instance, like my dad is a lawyer, so he's his own boss, essentially. So if he wants to take time off, he just doesn't. He just doesn't. And for me, if I want to take time off, I only get 8 days out a year to take off. If I'm sick, if I go on vacation, whatever, I only get 8 days. If I go more than 8 days, they start taking money from me.
Well, what if you're like, no, you're like, what if like you're real estate?
So there are certain situations that help you out, bless you, and that's where like insurance comes in, because sometimes the school will still dock your pay. So like when I went to Lincoln Charter, my sub job for elementary school PE, the original PE teacher was working and went to help some kid, get a fall or something, and he busted his knee and ripped his knee almost open. Just a random accident, but he was in